Her husband shouted, "You're fired!" in front of the whole hospital staff. Not in a private office. Not during a quiet argument behind a closed door. Not after asking one question or checking one document. He did it in the main lobby of Belmont Grace Hospital, where nurses stood frozen with patient files in their hands. Doctors stopped walking mid-step. Visitors turned from the reception desk, and the security guard near the entrance looked at the floor, because even he knew something cruel had just happened. Her name was Naomi Bennett Cole. At least, that was still her name that morning. She was 37 years old, wearing a simple cream blouse, black trousers, and the hospital ID badge she had used for 7 years. The badge said, Naomi Cole, Patient Relations Director. That was the title everyone saw. That was the title Adrian, her husband, loved to repeat when he wanted to remind her that he was above her. Patient Relations Director. Not executive. Not owner. Not board member. Not decision maker. Just the woman who calmed angry families, answered painful calls, sat with grieving mothers, explained delays, apologized for broken systems she did not create, and made the hospital feel human when powerful people forgot humans were the reason it existed. Adrian Cole stood in the center of the lobby that day in a navy suit, his jaw tight, his voice loud, his eyes full of that dangerous confidence men get when they think the room belongs to them. Behind him stood Cassandra Vale, the new strategy consultant he had hired 3 months earlier. She wore a red-fitted dress under a white coat she had no right to wear, because she was not clinical staff. She was not hospital leadership either. But Adrian let her walk through Belmont Grace like she owned polished floors, oxygen, and everyone's fear. Naomi stood near the reception desk holding a folder of patient complaints. She had been trying to stop a disaster. Adrian thought she was creating one. "You heard me," he said, pointing at her. "You're fired." The lobby went silent. A child waiting near the elevator stopped swinging his legs. A nurse named Lillian covered her mouth. Dr. Reed, the head of emergency medicine, lowered the chart in his hand. Marisol, the front desk supervisor, whispered, "Oh my God." Naomi did not move. Not because she was not hurt. She was hurt so deeply that for a moment her body protected her by becoming still. Her husband had shouted at her before. In their kitchen, in their bedroom, in the car, in those late-night arguments where he accused her of being difficult, cold, jealous, too emotional, too stubborn, too attached to the hospital. But he had never done this. He had never tried to strip her in front of the people who had watched her carry Belmont Grace through scandals, shortages, storms, deaths, lawsuits, and the pandemic years when everyone was tired and nobody had enough hands. Adrian stepped closer. "I will not have my wife undermining my authority in my hospital. My hospital." The words moved through the lobby like smoke. Naomi looked at him then, really looked. At the man she had married 10 years ago. At the man who once said her compassion made him proud. At the man who now stood under the Belmont Grace chandelier, humiliating her because she had dared to question a contract. "My hospital," he repeated, as if saying it twice would make it true. Cassandra touched his arm lightly. A soft touch. A public touch. Too familiar. Too comfortable. "Adrian," she said, voice sweet enough for a microphone, "maybe security should escort her out before this affects staff confidence." Staff confidence. Naomi almost laughed. The staff were not losing confidence because of her. They were losing confidence because the man pretending to lead them had just revealed he could not tell the difference between authority and performance. Adrian nodded toward security. "Take her badge." The security guard, Mr. Ellis, did not move. Adrian turned. "Did you hear me?" Mr. Ellis swallowed. "Yes, sir." But still he did not move. Because everyone in that lobby knew what Adrian did not. They knew Naomi had been at Belmont Grace before he came. They knew staff called her when families broke down. They knew she knew the night shift nurses by name. They knew she once sat in the parking lot for 2 hours with a father who had lost his wife because he could not drive home alone. They knew she had fought for translation services, better discharge calls, patient meal changes, wheelchair repairs, maternity grief counseling, and a fund for patients who could not afford transport home. They knew Belmont Grace felt like Belmont Grace because Naomi refused to let it become a cold machine. But Adrian did not know the most important thing. He did not know she owned the hospital. Not spiritually, not emotionally, legally, through the Belmont Grace Trust. Through a quiet ownership structure created by her grandmother Ruth years before Adrian ever learned how to wear power like cologne. Naomi's badge said Patient Relations Director. But the deed, the trust, the voting shares, and the final board authority all carried one name. Naomi Bennett. Not Cole, Bennett. Adrian had no idea. And that was why, when he shouted, "You're fired," in front of the whole staff, Naomi simply took off her ID badge, placed it gently on the reception desk, and said, "No, Adrian." He blinked. "No?" Her voice was quiet. So quiet people leaned in without meaning to. "No," she said again. "You don't get to fire me." Adrian laughed once. A cruel, sharp laugh. "Watch me." Naomi looked past him toward the glass entrance. A black car had just pulled up outside. Vivian Hart stepped out first. Naomi's attorney. Then Grace Monroe, her best friend and CFO of the Bennett Family Trust. Then Dr. Elaine Belmont, the retired physician and trustee who had known Naomi's grandmother for 40 years. And behind them came 3 board members Adrian had spent months trying to impress. They walked through the sliding doors together. Adrian's smile faded. Cassandra's hand dropped from his arm. Naomi picked up the folder of patient complaints again. Then she looked at her husband and said, "That's the problem with shouting in a hospital, Adrian. You never know who is about to hear the diagnosis." Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if someone has ever humiliated you in public because they thought your quiet position meant you had no power, stay with this story, because Adrian thought he had just fired his wife from his hospital. By the end of that afternoon, he would learn he had been standing inside her building the whole time. To understand how Adrian reached that lobby with enough arrogance to fire the woman who owned the floor under his shoes, you have to go back to Grandma Ruth. Ruth Bennett was not a doctor. She was not a hospital executive. She was not one of those people who came from old money and learned charity through engraved plaques. She started as a cleaner at Belmont Grace when the hospital was still called Belmont County Medical Center. She cleaned operating rooms, changed linens, washed blood from floors, helped old women find their slippers, brought soup to nurses who forgot to eat, learned which doctors were kind and which ones were only skilled. She used to say, "A hospital shows you the truth about people. Pain takes off the costume." Over the years, Ruth became more than staff. She became memory. Then, through a strange turn of fortune, a land dispute, and investments no one in the family understood until much later, Ruth became one of the people who helped save Belmont when it nearly closed. She bought debt quietly, invested through a trust, protected land the hospital sat on, made sure the community wing stayed open. And when the old board wanted to sell Belmont to a private chain that would have closed half the patient programs, Ruth stopped it. Not with shouting, with paper. Naomi was 12 when Grandma Ruth first took her to Belmont on a Sunday morning. The halls smelled like disinfectant, old coffee, and fear. Naomi hated it at first. Then she saw her grandmother sit beside a woman crying near the maternity wing and hold her hand until the woman could breathe again. Afterward, Naomi asked, "Grandma, did you know her?" Ruth said, "No." "Then why did you sit with her?" Grandma Ruth looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because chairs are for sitting, child, not judging." That was the first lesson. There were many. By 17, Naomi volunteered at the patient help desk. By 22, she studied healthcare administration. By 26, she was working in patient advocacy. By 30, after her divorce from a smaller dream and before her marriage to Adrian, she returned to Belmont Grace full-time. She started as a coordinator, then manager, then patient relations director. She chose that title, not because it was small, Because it kept her close to the place where systems touched people. The board knew who she was. The trustees knew. Vivian knew. Grace knew. Dr. Elaine knew. A few senior people knew the trust structure, but most staff did not know the full truth. Naomi preferred it that way. She did not want people bowing to ownership. She wanted them telling her when the food was cold, when phones were unanswered, when patients waited too long, when families were confused, when doctors ignored complaints, when billing letters scared poor people more than diagnosis. Power worked better, she believed, when it listened before it announced itself. Then she married Adrian Cole. At first, Adrian admired her. He was a young hospital operations consultant then, ambitious, intelligent, polished, and hungry, in a way Naomi mistook for purpose. He loved walking through Belmont with her, loved hearing stories about patient programs, loved saying, "You really know how this place breathes." He asked good questions. He listened, or seemed to. When the board needed a new chief administrative officer years later, Naomi recommended him. That was one of the decisions that haunted her. Adrian was qualified on paper. He understood systems. He knew finance. He could speak the language of executives and charm donors into opening their wallets. Naomi thought his sharpness would help the hospital. She thought love and work could share a hallway without one poisoning the other. For a while, it worked. Adrian improved procurement, reduced waste, expanded profitable services, secured new equipment deals. The board liked him. Staff respected him carefully. Naomi was proud. Then pride became ownership in his mouth. First, he said, "Our hospital." Then, "The hospital I run." Then, "My hospital." The first time Naomi corrected him, they were at dinner. He had said, "My hospital needs stronger branding." Naomi looked up. "Belmont does not belong to you." He smiled. "You know what I mean. I know what you said." He leaned back. "Naomi, don't be sensitive. I'm the one carrying the administrative burden." She almost laughed. She had carried Belmont through flu seasons, grief storms, staffing crises, broken systems, and families screaming because nobody had explained a diagnosis properly. But she let it pass. That was how many problems become houses. You let the first brick pass. Cassandra arrived the next year. Cassandra Vale, brand strategist, crisis consultant, beautiful, sharp, always wearing heels too high for hospital floors and perfume too strong for recovery rooms. Adrian hired her to lead a premium patient experience transformation. Naomi hated the phrase immediately. Not because she opposed improvement. Because Cassandra's first proposal suggested removing the free family tea station in the oncology wing because it looked low-end. Naomi said no. Cassandra smiled. "Naomi, I understand emotional attachment, but the hospital's brand needs consistency." Naomi looked at the slide deck. That tea station costs less than one executive lunch and comforts families during chemo. It stays. Adrian laughed lightly in the meeting. Naomi is very protective of the little things. The little things. Tea, chairs, interpreter access, warm blankets, follow-up calls, reduced parking fees for long-term patients, quiet rooms, prayer rooms, better signs, transport help, patient dignity, little things. Cassandra looked at Adrian, not Naomi. "We may need to align internal stakeholders." Internal stakeholders. Naomi smiled then. Not warmly. "Please do." After that, Adrian began calling her resistant. At home, he said, "You embarrass me in meetings. I ask questions. You challenge me in front of consultants. I challenge bad ideas in front of whoever brings them. You act like you have final say." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. The truth sat behind her teeth. "I do," but she did not say it. Not yet, because Grandma Ruth had taught her something else. Never reveal the deed until someone reveals their character. Adrian revealed more every month. He cut staff wellness budgets while approving lobby redesigns. He reduced patient advocate hours to fund digital branding. He ignored nurse complaints about scheduling pressure. He allowed Cassandra into meetings where she had no clinical understanding, but too much influence. Then came the contract. The one that led to the lobby. Cassandra proposed outsourcing patient relations intake to a private call center connected to one of her former clients. The contract was expensive, cold, wrong for Belmont. It would remove the human first response from vulnerable families and replace it with scripts read by people hundreds of miles away. Naomi reviewed the documents and found hidden fees, weak privacy protections, and a clause allowing data use for experience analytics that made her stomach tighten. She took the concerns to Adrian privately. He barely looked up from his laptop. Not now. It needs to be now. He sighed. Naomi, you don't understand scalable operations. I understand patient trust. That is not a metric. It becomes one when you lose it. He closed the laptop. Cassandra's team has already briefed the board, not the trust board. His eyes narrowed. What? Naomi caught herself. The full board, she said. He stared at her for a second, then smiled. Sometimes I forget how attached you are to Old Belmont. Old Belmont is why people still come here. No, people come here because we modernized. People come here because they believe someone will answer when they are scared. He stood. This is exactly the problem. You think feelings are strategy, and you think strategy can survive without people. That argument ended with Adrian leaving the room. The next morning, Naomi discovered the contract had been fast-tracked for approval. Without her review. Without patient privacy sign-off. Without Dr. Reed's input. Without trustee review. That was when she called Vivian. Vivian asked one question. Has he signed? Not yet. Then stop him, Naomi tried. She walked into the executive meeting with the patient complaint folder and the contract notes. Cassandra was presenting. Adrian sat at the head of the table. 3 department heads looked uncomfortable. Naomi entered quietly. Adrian's face hardened. This meeting is closed. So is the contract process until privacy and trust review are complete. Cassandra smiled. We already addressed operational concerns. No, you addressed slide concerns. Adrian stood. Naomi, outside. No. The words seemed to shock him. This contract touches patient data, complaint intake, vulnerable family communication, and trust-funded advocacy services. You cannot sign it without review. Adrian's voice turned cold. You are not legal. No, Vivian is. That got his attention. You called your lawyer? I called the trust lawyer. The room went still. Cassandra's smile faded slightly. Adrian stepped closer. I said outside. Naomi did not move. He lowered his voice. You are my wife. Do not humiliate me. Naomi looked at him. You are the administrator. Do not endanger patients. That sentence pushed him over the edge. He walked past her, out of the conference room, into the hallway, and toward the lobby where staff had gathered for a scheduled donor walkthrough. Naomi followed because the contract folder was still in his hand. Adrian, stop! He turned in the main lobby. People looked over. Cassandra came behind them. Adrian saw the staff, saw the audience, and made the mistake proud people make when they think public power will hide private fear. He raised his voice. I am done with this insubordination. Naomi stopped. The lobby quieted. Adrian, she said softly, do not do this here. His eyes flashed. Oh, now you care about public embarrassment? Cassandra stood behind him, silent but pleased. Adrian pointed toward Naomi's badge. You have undermined leadership, interfered with executive decisions, and abused your position because you cannot separate marriage from work. A nurse whispered, What? Dr. Reed stepped forward. Adrian cut him off. No, everyone should hear this. Belmont Grace is entering a new era, and we cannot have staff clinging to old emotional systems. Old emotional systems. Naomi knew he meant her. She felt every eye in the lobby. Every nurse, every receptionist, every doctor, every patient family, every person who had ever seen her walk calmly into chaos and make it gentler. Then Adrian shouted it. "You're fired!" The words cracked through the lobby. And now Vivian, Grace, Dr. Elaine, and board members were walking through the entrance. Adrian did not understand at first. He still thought he had control of the scene. Vivian walked straight to Naomi. "Are you all right?" Naomi nodded. "No." Grace touched her shoulder. "Honest answer." Dr. Elaine looked at Adrian with the kind of disappointment that could sterilize a room. Adrian adjusted his suit jacket. "Vivian, this is an internal employment matter." Vivian opened her leather folder. "No, Mr. Cole. This is a governance matter." He blinked. "Governance?" One of the board members, Mr. Alvarez, stepped forward. "Adrian, why is staff gathered in the lobby?" Cassandra answered quickly. "There was a personnel issue." Dr. Reed said from behind them. There was a public humiliation. Several nurses murmured agreement. Adrian glared at him. Naomi finally spoke. "Adrian attempted to terminate me for stopping an unauthorized contract." He laughed. "Attempted? Naomi, I am Chief Administrative Officer." Vivian looked at him. "You are." He smiled slightly. Then she continued. "You are not the owner. You are not the trustee. You are not authorized to remove Naomi Bennett from Belmont Grace Hospital." He froze. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. Naomi watched the moment confusion entered his face. It was almost quiet. Almost sad. Because 10 years of marriage had not taught him enough to ask why her grandmother's name was on the foundation documents, why trustees met with her privately, why certain contracts paused when she raised concerns, why the board always returned her calls. He had thought it was affection, sentiment, old loyalty. He never considered authority. Adrian turned to Naomi. "What is she talking about?" Grace crossed her arms. "Oh, this is my favorite chapter." Vivian removed a document from the folder. Belmont Grace Hospital is owned through the Belmont Grace Trust and Bennett Health Holdings. Majority control rests with Naomi Bennett, granddaughter and designated successor of Ruth Bennett. Naomi serves internally in patient relations by choice, not by limitation. The lobby went silent again. Different silence now. Not shock from cruelty. Shock from truth. Adrian looked at Naomi. His mouth opened, closed. Cassandra's face lost color. Mr. Ellis, the security guard, looked like he wanted to vanish and applaud at the same time. Naomi's voice was steady. "I told you not to do this here." Adrian whispered, "You own Belmont?" "No," she said softly. "I protect it." Grace smiled. "That means yes, legally." Adrian looked around the lobby, as if the walls had betrayed him. "This is impossible." Dr. Elaine stepped forward. "Your ignorance is not impossibility." A few staff lowered their heads to hide reactions. Cassandra tried to recover. "Perhaps this should move to a private room." Naomi looked at her. "You suggested security escort me out in public." Cassandra swallowed. Vivian turned to the board members. "Given Mr. Cole's conduct, attempted unauthorized termination of controlling trustee, public staff intimidation, and fast-tracking of an unapproved patient data contract, I recommend immediate administrative suspension pending review." Adrian's eyes widened. "Suspension? You cannot suspend me." Mr. Alvarez looked pained. "Adrian, the board can." Naomi looked at her husband. For a moment, she saw the man he had been before power ate his tenderness. Then that image passed. The man in front of her had used their marriage as a weapon and her title as a cage. She said, "Suspend him." The words were quiet, final. Vivian nodded. Mr. Alvarez turned to Adrian. "Effective immediately. You are placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Cassandra stepped back. But Grace noticed. "Oh no, Consultant Barbie, stay close." Naomi shot Grace a look. Grace lifted both hands. "I said it softly." Vivian added, "Cassandra Vale's contract is also frozen, pending review of procurement irregularities, conflict disclosures, and patient data concerns." Cassandra's face tightened. This is absurd. Dr. Reed said, no, the contract was absurd. This is overdue. A nurse whispered, amen. Adrian turned to Naomi. You did this. Naomi felt the old pull. The wife part. The part trained to calm, explain, soften. But the owner in her stood still. No, Adrian, you shouted loud enough for truth to answer. He looked at her badge on the desk. Then at the staff. Then at Vivian. Then back at Naomi. I am your husband. She nodded slowly. That is the saddest part. Security did escort someone out that day. Not Naomi. Adrian left with his access badge suspended, his face pale, and Cassandra walking 3 steps behind him, no longer touching his arm. The lobby remained still after he left. Nobody knew what to say. Then Nurse Lillian began crying. That broke the room. Marisol came around the desk and hugged Naomi. Dr. Reed placed a hand over his chest and nodded once. Mr. Ellis whispered, I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett. Naomi picked up her badge from the desk. She looked at it. Patient Relations Director, a title people thought was small because they did not understand how much power lived in caring properly. She clipped it back onto her blouse. Then she turned to the staff. I am sorry you witnessed that, Dr. Reed said. We're sorry you lived it. Naomi's eyes filled. Grace whispered, do not cry in front of the vending machine. It will become historic. Naomi's eye through tears. Just a little. Enough to breathe. The review began that same day. By evening, Vivian had secured the contract files. Grace pulled procurement records. Dr. Elaine contacted trustees. The privacy officer documented concerns. Nurses submitted statements. Department heads admitted they had felt pressured to approve Cassandra's recommendations. And Adrian began calling. Naomi did not answer. Then came texts. We need to talk. You humiliated me. Why didn't you tell me you owned it? I am your husband. I deserve to know. That one almost made her laugh. Deserved. The same man who hid consultant meetings, ignored her warnings, and fired her in public believed marriage entitled him to information he had not earned through respect. She forwarded every text to Vivian. That night, Naomi went home to a house that suddenly felt colder than the hospital lobby. Adrian's shoes were still by the door. His jacket hung on the chair. His coffee mug sat in the sink. Marriage leaves evidence everywhere. She stood in the kitchen, looking at his mug, and finally cried. Grace came over with soup and no questions. Vivian came later with documents. Naomi sat at the table between them. I recommended him, she whispered. Grace's face softened. You recommended the man he showed you then. I missed signs. Yes. Naomi looked up. Grace did not soften the truth. That was why Naomi trusted her. Grace continued. You missed some. You ignored some. You hoped through some. That is human. But you stopped him before he harmed patients through that contract. That matters. Vivian added, and now we proceed carefully. Divorce? Naomi asked. Vivian did not answer too fast. That is your decision. Naomi looked toward the hallway. The life she had built with Adrian was everywhere. Photos, books, wedding gifts. Old laughter trapped in frames, but she remembered the lobby. You're fired. In front of everyone. His finger pointed. Cassandra behind him. My hospital. Naomi closed her eyes. No one who loves me should need to be surprised by my power before respecting my dignity. Grace reached for her hand. That sounds like an answer. It was. The investigation took 6 weeks. Adrian had not stolen money directly. That would have been simpler. But he had blurred procurement lines, favored Cassandra's firm, bypassed review steps, pressured staff, ignored patient privacy warnings, and created a work culture where people were afraid to challenge him. Cassandra's consulting firm had not disclosed a financial relationship with the call center vendor. That was a major problem. The contract died. Her firm was terminated. Adrian's administrative leave became removal. The board allowed him to resign officially to avoid a public scandal that could harm patient trust, but internally the record was clear. He was done. He tried to negotiate through marriage first, then through lawyers, then through guilt. He came home one evening while Naomi was packing his books into boxes. "I loved you," he said. She stopped. "Did you?" His face tightened. "That is unfair." "No, firing me in the lobby was unfair. This is a question." He looked exhausted. "I was under pressure. Pressure revealed you. It did not invent you." He flinched. "I didn't know who you were." Naomi turned fully. "That is because you only looked at my title." He looked down. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to know if you would respect me without needing to know what I owned." His eyes lifted. "And I failed?" She said nothing. He laughed bitterly. "I guess I did." There was a silence. Then he said, "Was any of it real?" That hurt. "Yes," she said. "That is why it is painful." He sat down heavily. "I don't know how to fix this." Naomi looked at him. "You can't fix what you still think happened to you." His face changed. She continued, "You are sorry you were exposed. You are sorry you lost authority. You are sorry people know, but you have not said you are sorry for humiliating me." His mouth opened, closed. Then he whispered, "I am sorry." "For what specifically?" He looked annoyed at first, then ashamed. "For shouting at you. For trying to fire you publicly. For letting Cassandra disrespect you. For calling Belmont my hospital. For not listening." It was the beginning of an apology. Not enough, but the beginning. Naomi nodded. "I hear you." He looked hopeful. That hurt too. Hearing him was not the same as returning to him. The divorce filing went out 2 days later. Adrian moved into a serviced apartment downtown. Cassandra disappeared from hospital circles, then from Adrian's life too, when his title no longer opened enough doors. Grace said, "Some consultants only consult near power." Naomi told her to be kind. Grace said, "I am being concise." Belmont changed after Adrian left. At first, staff walked carefully around Naomi. They knew now. Owner, trustee, majority control. The woman who had eaten cafeteria soup beside them was the person who could remove executives. Naomi hated the distance. So she called a hospital-wide meeting. Not in the grand auditorium, in the lobby. The same place Adrian had tried to humiliate her. Doctors, nurses, reception staff, janitors, billing clerks, cafeteria workers, security, technicians, volunteers, and administrators filled the space. Naomi stood near the reception desk. No podium, no stage, just her. "I know some of you learned something about me in a painful way," she began. A few people nodded. "I did not hide ownership because I was ashamed of it. I kept my patient relations role because Belmont Grace exists for patients before it exists for boards, budgets, or executives. Power that never sits near the front desk becomes dangerous." People listened. She continued, "What happened here was unacceptable. Not because I own the hospital, because no person in this building should be publicly humiliated, dismissed without process, or punished for raising concerns." Nurse Lillian wiped her eyes. Naomi looked around the lobby. "We are going to rebuild trust, not with slogans, with systems." And they did. A staff protection policy, clear whistleblower channels, contract review transparency, patient data safeguards, nurse advisory council, a family experience board, executive conduct rules, anonymous reporting, leadership training that included everyone from surgeons to supervisors. And the T station in oncology stayed. Naomi personally restocked it the first week after the meeting. Cameras caught her once. Someone posted the photo online. The caption read, "Hospital owner refills T station after firing scandal." Naomi hated the attention, but the community loved it. Not because tea was everything, because people understand symbols. The Belmont Grace Trust also expanded. Grandma Ruth had left instructions for a patient dignity fund, but it had never fully grown. Naomi made it central. Transport vouchers, family lodging support, meal cards, translation services, grief counseling, billing navigation, support for patients recovering without family. She named it the Ruth Bennett Dignity Fund. At the launch, Dr. Elaine spoke. Ruth believed hospitals should not only save lives, they should protect dignity while trying. Naomi cried quietly in the front row. The divorce finalized 10 months later. Naomi returned fully to Bennett, not Cole. Adrian sent one final letter after signing. Naomi, I am sorry for what I did in the lobby. I thought power was something you performed, and I performed it badly. I used your title to make myself feel taller. I used my role to ignore your warnings. I let Cassandra's attention feed the worst parts of me. Belmont was never mine. You were never beneath me. I do not expect forgiveness. I only wanted to name it. Adrian. Naomi read it twice, then placed it in a file. Not her heart. A file. Some apologies deserve storage, not access. Years passed. Belmont Grace became stronger than before. Not perfect. No hospital is perfect. People still waited too long sometimes. Bills still scared families. Staff still got tired. Systems still broke. But now, when they broke, people knew they could speak. That mattered. Naomi remained close to the lobby. She still wore a badge. It now read, Naomi Bennett, Trust Chair, Patient Dignity Director. Grace said the title was too long. Naomi said dignity was worth the letters. Mr. Ellis, the security guard, eventually became Director of Safety Services. Marisol became Patient Access Manager. Nurse Lillian joined the Nurse Advisory Council. Dr. Reed led Emergency Reform. Dr. Elaine remained trustee until she retired. Vivian still reviewed every major contract with the energy of someone who enjoyed saving people from bad clauses. The lobby where Adrian shouted became known quietly among staff as the place truth walked in. Naomi pretended not to know. She knew. 1 year after the incident, the hospital held an event for the Ruth Bennett Dignity Fund. Staff wanted to honor Naomi. She resisted. Grace overruled her. You can accept appreciation without accidentally becoming arrogant. I hate speeches about me. Then sit there and suffer with grace. I have grace. Exactly. The event was held in the hospital courtyard. Patients, families, staff, donors, and community leaders gathered under soft lights. At the center was a large photograph of Grandma Ruth as a young cleaner at Belmont, standing with a mop in one hand and a smile that looked like she already knew everyone's secrets. Naomi spoke briefly. She told the story carefully. Not to shame Adrian, to honor the lesson. Someone once tried to fire me in our lobby, she said. The audience went quiet. Many people thought the power in that moment came from the person shouting. But real power was in the nurse who stayed with a scared patient, the security guard who refused to move too quickly, the doctor who spoke up, the staff who told the truth, the lawyer who brought documents, and the grandmother who understood that ownership without dignity is just another form of control. Applause rose slowly. Naomi continued, Belmont Grace belongs legally to a trust, but morally, it belongs to every person who protects the dignity of someone in pain. People stood. Naomi looked toward the lobby windows. For a second, she remembered herself standing there with Adrian's finger pointed at her, feeling the old wound of being made small. Then she looked at the crowd. She did not feel small anymore. Later that night, Grace found her near the tea station. Crying? No. Liar. Naomi smiled. Grace handed her a cup. To Grandma Ruth. To Grandma Ruth. They drank tea from paper cups under fluorescent hospital lights. It was not glamorous. It was perfect. The story spread beyond Belmont. Women wrote to Naomi, hospital workers, teachers. receptionists, assistants, family business daughters, wives who had been treated like employees in homes they helped build, women whose husbands controlled titles but not truth. One message stayed with her. My husband calls his company his empire, but I built the client system, trained the staff, and kept the books. He shouted at me in front of everyone last month. Today I contacted a lawyer. Thank you for reminding me that quiet women can own the floor too. Naomi printed that message and placed it inside her desk. Not for pride, for purpose. Then came the Hidden Floor Initiative. Grace named it, of course. It supported women whose labor, ownership, shares, or authority had been hidden behind husbands, fathers, brothers, or family titles. Not only hospitals, restaurants, clinics, hotels, schools, farms, salons, logistics companies. Any place where a woman's work held up walls while a man stood in front of the sign. The program taught documentation, equity protection, contract literacy, leadership presence, workplace dignity, and exit planning. At the first session, Naomi held up her old badge. Patient Relations Director. Then she held up trust documents. She said, "This badge was true. These documents were also true. Never let one visible title make you forget what else belongs to you." Women cried, took notes, asked questions. One asked, "What if he calls me emotional?" Naomi answered, "Ask him why your emotions are trusted to carry the work but not the authority." Another asked, "What if my family says I should not bring lawyers into marriage?" Vivian, sitting beside Naomi, replied, "Then bring two." Grace whispered, "That's why we love her." The initiative grew. Belmont became a symbol, not of secret revenge, not of revealed structure. Naomi always corrected people who made the wrong lesson. Some said, "Be careful who you disrespect. She might be the owner." Naomi said, "No, be careful who you disrespect, because they are human." Some said, "He should have treated her well because she had power." Naomi said, "He should have treated her well before knowing that." That difference mattered. The true lesson was not hidden wealth. It was visible dignity. Adrian eventually rebuilt his career in a smaller role at a regional clinic network far away. Naomi heard he became quieter, less flashy, more careful. Maybe shame taught him. Maybe loss did. Maybe both. He sent yearly donations to the Ruth Bennett Dignity Fund. Anonymous at first. Grace found out because anonymous donors still leave financial trails. "Do we return it?" Grace asked. Naomi thought about it. "No, let money that once came from pride serve patients now." "Do we thank him?" "No." Grace smiled. "Perfect." Naomi never married again. Not because she hated love, because peace had become too honest to trade for performance. Maybe one day, maybe not. She had friends, work, purpose. A garden, a house where no one shouted, a hospital where people could speak, a grandmother's legacy, and most importantly, a self she no longer hid from to keep someone else comfortable. Years later, on the 5th anniversary of the lobby incident, staff surprised her. They unveiled a small plaque near the reception desk. Not dramatic, not embarrassing, just brass, simple and warm. It read, "In honor of Ruth Bennett and Naomi Bennett, who taught Belmont Grace that dignity is not a department, it is the foundation." Naomi cried immediately. Grace said, "Very professional, Chairwoman." Naomi laughed through tears. Mr. Ellis stood nearby, wiping his eyes. Dr. Reed pretended to check his pager. Nurse Lillian hugged her. Marisol said, "This lobby remembers." Naomi looked around. It did. The polished floor, the reception desk, the chandelier, the entrance Vivian walked through, the place where she had been fired, the place where she had claimed everything without raising her voice. Her husband shouted, "You're fired," in front of the whole staff. He had no idea his wife was the hospital owner. People loved the dramatic part. The lobby, the shout, the badge on the desk. The consultant in red. The lawyer walking in. The board members. The truth revealed. The husband suspended. The hospital reclaimed. I understand. It is dramatic. But the deeper story is about the danger of underestimating quiet authority. It is about the woman behind the desk who knows where every crack in the system lives. It is about the wife whose husband only saw her title, not her trust. It is about the worker who turns care into structure. It is about the kind of power that does not need to shout until shouting threatens patience. If you are listening and someone has made you feel small because your title looks small, remember Naomi. If they call you emotional because you protect people, remember Naomi. If they use public humiliation to control you, remember Naomi. If they say, my company, my hospital, my house, or my business, while standing on work you built, check the papers. Check the trust. Check the shares. Check your contribution. Check your rights. And even if you own nothing on paper, own your dignity. No one should have to be rich to be respected. No one should have to be the owner before a husband speaks kindly. No one should have to reveal power to receive basic decency. But if the day comes when someone tries to fire you from a place your soul helped build, do not waste all your strength screaming. Call Vivian. Call Grace. Gather the board. Bring the documents. Pick up your badge and let truth enter through the front door. My name is Naomi Bennett. My husband shouted, "You're fired!" in front of the whole staff. He thought he was ending my place in Belmont Grace. He did not know he was standing inside the legacy my grandmother built, the trust I controlled, and the hospital I had protected long before he learned to call it his. That day, he lost his title. Cassandra lost her contract. The bad deal died. The staff found their voice. The patients kept their dignity. And I learned that sometimes the person trying to fire you is only exposing the exact reason they should never have been allowed to lead.